Alright, hello, willkommen, bienvenue, konnichiwa, ni hao, jambo, marhaba. It's time for the Honest Inquisition yet again, episode 282 on Sunday, 28th of May 2023. I'm Phil.
I'm Matt.
And tonight we're very happy to be joined by a very special guest, Tim Freke. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm doing really well, Phil.
Thanks for finding the time to join us. We really appreciate it. We know you're a busy guy and you've got a million projects, I imagine, on the go at the same time.
I have, yeah. Too many, really.
You must really like writing books.
Yeah, although I haven't put out a book for a long time. I wrote a lot of books during a period of my life, and then they started taking longer and longer. And I haven't, I may have even done with books. It may be that I look to other medium to actually get ideas across more quickly now.
I suppose that's a case of sort of harnessing the technology as it's developed. You know, if you go back to the printing press, when the printing press came along and it was such a historical game changer and changed the way we all interact and how information is dispersed. And now we're in the digital age, the internet age, and that's the next game changer, isn't it? Absolutely
right. And that's exactly right. And so, hence it's a pleasure to come and speak to you and to anyone who's listening and explore ideas in that way.
Yes. A lot of people will be familiar with your work from the Jesus Mysteries. Personally, my introduction to you was this one, the Hermetica, that you did with Peter Gandy, which I know a lot of people who listen to us have read. And I think it was through our chat room that this was recommended to me. Mm-hmm. And it's a really nice sort of overview of the Hermetic texts and nice introduction. So I really enjoyed that one. But going on to sort of what I really wanted to ask you about was sort of the big questions, really, because you are a philosopher, and we don't get to talk to a philosopher every day, do we, Matt?
Except you, obviously, Phil.
Yeah, well, no comment. There's so many aspects of the human condition that are sort of mysteries, aren't there, Tim? And one of the things that often confuses me, because I'm interested in metaphysics and the nature of us and what makes up a person, and I wanted to get your take on this because I keep reading different terminology for sort of the component parts of a human. There's spirit, there's soul, there's consciousness, there's aura, there's all these different things. I mean, how do you sort of conceive of what makes up a human being?
Well, my views have changed considerably over the last 10 years. So in most of my books, I was exploring the traditional idea. And I think the traditional idea is actually essentially quite simple. There's a very basic division of body and soul, or psyche. The Greek word psyche means soul. Soul comes from the Germanic, but it means the same thing. And I think they get theologized. But essentially what they're pointing to is something obvious, which is we're always experiencing two different domains. There's the domain of the physical world and the senses, and then there's the domain of imaginal information, which is the psyche or soul. So right from the beginning, I think human beings have been trying to account for what are these two domains that we're experiencing, how are they related, and what does it mean for life and death? So essentially, I think that it's kind of obvious. And for me, it's like what intrigues me now is that my body is making funny noises, which are reaching you via technology. But what you're hearing in the psyche is meaning. but there's no meaning in the funny noises. They're completely different domains. And then in various traditions, you get this idea sometimes called spirit, pneuma. There's lots of different names for it. And I think that's referring to something more universal, which in the past I would have translated with the word consciousness, but I don't think that's the right word anymore. I'd now say being is a better word to use. It's like there is a beingness to everything. And my essential beingness and your essential beingness is the same beingness of the universe. But I am a unique body and soul. And then how's that related? And for me, the big turnaround has been to go, the traditional view, one way or another, is that you're essentially this disembodied soul thing, which has got trapped in a body and needs to get out. And I think that was an interesting view that arose historically for all sorts of good reasons. But now the revolution that's happened in our understanding now is that we know that the universe is a process of evolution. And therefore, it seems much more reasonable now to think that the body and soul have evolved. The body and psyche have evolved. And that's what I'm interested in exploring.
A lot of the sort of spirituality that's become popular in recent times has this sort of concept of oneness, and I'm quite interested in gnosticism and things like that, and they put it in a certain way of it's like points of light, and that one shall leave this sort of mortal being. We're all sort of points of light that are trying to escape back to unity, to this sort of oneness. Do you think there's anything in that? Are you believing in that sort of thing?
Not really, not now. It feels like it was again, it's like, I think what I'm interested in, I think everything is evolving. So I think spirituality has to evolve, just like our understanding of the world has evolved, just as science is an evolution of what Archimedes did, or everything keeps evolving. So although I think there is ancient wisdom for sure, I don't think it's like they knew and now we've forgotten and we need to remember. I think they had a stab at it as best they could with the ideas they had, the images they had, and then they passed it on to us to do better. And so this idea of the sparks that you get in the Hermetic tradition and the Gnostic tradition is a lovely image. But I think we need to push it on now and see it. What really fascinates me is, can we account for spirituality, the experience of oneness, the experience of something bigger than us, the immortality of the soul, all the experiences you can have if you go and explore the imaginal with psychedelics or meditation or any of the myriad techniques that I've been playing with for decades now. And and you probably have too. It's a big place out there. Can we account for all of that within an evolutionary framework? That's what really intrigues me now, because that opens up the possibility of uniting all of our human knowledge into one narrative. And that wasn't available to our ancestors who were putting together the Hermetica 2,000 years ago, say.
Right.
But that wisdom that they put together is what informed the Renaissance, which then created the Enlightenment, which has now led to us. And somehow we need to find the great danger, I think, is that the process we've made culturally has led us to dismiss all of that, whereas I think it's highly important, really, really important, and we need to now integrate it back into our general understanding of the universe.
You've used the term evolution a couple of times already,
Yeah.
and I'm not an expert on biology or Darwinian theory or anything like that, but it's sort of my rough understanding is that there is something that pushes biological evolution, whether that be characteristics that favour survival or breeding, or it could be numerous different things, but there is a pushing, a motive force that pushes evolution biologically. So what's going to push us to evolve spiritually if such a thing is needed?
Well, the first thing is that if we now have to, the big revelation, I mean, Darwin's revelation was immense. And I think one of the things that he showed was that we didn't need anything pushing, that actually the process itself was creative. But then 100 years ago, all of that became, well, 100 years ago, we realized the whole universe had evolved. So that 14 billion years, just under, the universe was hydrogen, just about. And now that hydrogen has become you and me having this conversation. That's one hell of an image. It's a very Gnostic myth in many ways, I think.
Yeah, it's like the monad, isn't it, in the Doha?
Yeah, it's going, look, for the simplest of beginnings has come everything, all of matter and then life and then soul. So that the universe is itself a process of becoming intelligent. The universe is learning how to be all these things. And I think that process is now happening primarily on the level of psyche. And you can see that because we're talking in different parts of the country on computers and Zoom and the internet. And it's like, where did all that suddenly come from? Because our ancestors certainly had no idea about that. Well, it came from the psyche. It came from the imagination. And that's where all the evolution is taking place. We are biologically not evolving much. We are, but not much. All the action is now taking place in the realm of the psyche, in the realm of ideas. So I think that's where we'll move. Now, I think you may have put it on some of the stuff that you sent out about what we were going to discuss. My intuition, is that the right word? I feel like a transformation is happening. I think a lot of people do. I'd be astonished if it wasn't, given that everything's been transforming for 14 billion years. It seems odd to think it won't carry on. And then the question is, well, what is the next thing? And everyone focuses always on the technology, and because that's amazing, and that will carry on, I'm sure, and surprise us, and it's doing it right now, isn't it? With AI and all of that. But I also think we are evolving as psyches, as souls, immensely. I mean, if you study history, and I kind of have a little obsession with studying history, you realize that human beings today are not the same as human beings in the past. We've come from them, so there's huge similarities. But the history, history is not somewhere you want to live. People didn't treat each other very well there. And we have grown, we've become more compassionate. So the thesis I'm exploring is that state of awakening to oneness, which I've been exploring all my life since I was very young and sharing with other people. Is that a process like the ancients tended to believe of escape from this awful shithole that we're stuck in? And so we never have to reincarnate, we never have to come back, and we just get away and get home. Is it that? And I understand why they'd think that. Or is it actually the leading edge of this evolutionary process that we now know is happening? So that the increase in people actually being able to experience this state of oneness is a reflection of what may be the next movement in our human evolution, the evolution of the soul. So that's what I mean by the evolution of a unividual, an individual who's conscious of unity with the universe. And I wonder whether the next step in evolution may be a jump in how we understand who we are.
Right. This is something that I was looking at your website, this new concept of unividualism. And it's a great word. I like the word. And what's the ICU, is it?
The ICU, the International Community of Unividuals. Right. And because a lot of what I do, a lot of what I do is experiential, and a lot of it's to do with connecting for reasons we can explain. So I quite like the gag that it was called the ICU, because that's what we do. We see each other.
Yeah, it's like, because you're in the process of building a community to this end. So can you lay out a bit more detail about what this concept is, this unividual concept, and how maybe it differs from other philosophies?
Well, one of the things which has always been important to me, apart from perhaps a brief period when I was much younger, is that I've never been of the school that went, oh, the individual's a bad thing, we need to get back to oneness, you're not really you, I'm not really me, you're an illusion, all of that stuff, which has become, it became very popular about 10 years ago, and now I think it's beginning to pass, I'm glad to say. So my own feeling always and especially now, is the individual is the foundation from which we wake up to something, to the oneness of being, the thing I mentioned before. And part of that, for me, a very simple way of getting that is to say, look, I'm not this separate individual called Tim. I am Tim in relationship with the universe. There's never a moment where the universe isn't present. And you are you in relationship to the universe. And that's because everything about you has come from the universe. You're embedded in it. So the language which appeals to me is to go, look, there is a fundamental oneness of being. If this is an evolutionary process, and it's going from the simplest thing we can possibly imagine and becoming richer and richer and more emergent as new things emerge, then what's the simplest quality that we could think would be the foundation? And I think the simplest quality is the one that Plato pointed to, which is being, or Pythagoras. The simplest quality is, what's the quality everything has? Well, it being, okay. And then all the other qualities are different. So with our present understanding of physics, you can take the analogy of a field and information and go, well, maybe we can understand the universe as a field of being with evolving information, which is becoming ever more complex. But it's one field. You know, the bit like in physics, they go, look, there may be two electrons, but there's one field, and they're kind of the same because they're movements in the one field. Well, maybe everything is a movement in one field. The isness, the Zen phrase I quite like. So you've got a oneness of being arising as all of these different informational systems, including you and me, on all of these different levels of emergence. And then here we are. So what happens if one of us, or, you know, if all three of us right now goes, oh yeah, my being and the being of everything else is the same being? Then you start coming into these states of awakening. And there's a big shift. And if you go deeply into it, it's a really big shift. And that's what I mean by the unividual. And the most obvious thing that comes from that, in my experience of having done this a lot now over the decades, is that it elicits a emotional response. And the emotional response is love, which is why I think you'll find in all of the spiritual traditions that I've written about these two important ideas. One is oneness, and the other is love, or compassion, or benevolence. And that's what I think we wake up to. And so what I'm trying to suggest is that process, that when I become conscious of the field of being, the field of being as me recognizes the oneness of everything. Now that's essentially very similar really to the idea you'll find in Hinduism or Hermetica or Gnosticism. It's just now being reframed for the 21st century. And there was a point, my friends, when I realized, I don't know when it was, 20 years ago probably now, where I suddenly thought, do you know what? The thing I admire about all these people I'm writing about, the Rumis and the Bodhidharmas and the Valentinus, the Gnostic, and all these people, is they all reinvented the spiritual tradition for their own time. That's why I remember their names, because they moved it on in some significant way. And that made me think, oh, look, it's not enough to write about all these other things that were done in the past. We need to move it on. And part of that is it needs to be a spirituality which can engage directly with all of the other things we now know, and which you can put into the bracket of science, whatever that means. But, you know, all of that knowledge we have that's enabling us to connect like this on the internet, we need it all to become one thing. Otherwise, spirituality will just disappear off into an irrelevance.
That's a really great point you made about when you were talking about Valentinus and the Rumi and whatnot. We often downplay what would you call them? Maybe spiritual masters from the past. We say, oh, it's derivative. They're borrowing ideas from something earlier. That sort of attitude. When no, they're taking what they already had and then pushing it on, moving it forward.
Yeah, really, they are, and that's why they're and in a ways that are interesting enough that we still notice it today.
You're still reading about them.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2,000 years plus later. It's
exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Who's going to be? Will they be reading about you, Tim, in 2,000 years? Do you think? When we're all Unividuals.
Well, who knows? What I hope is that what I hope is that there are enough people working on this that it will have the effect that I hope. My feeling is that spirituality has a big role to play in the next phase of human evolution. Honestly, I think it's not in any position to do it. It needs to kind of grow up. It needs to apply the same levels of rigor to itself that other forms of inquiry have applied. And it's that level of rigor which has given us such big jumps in our understanding. And if we can do that, then I think we can then spirituality can be seen in a new light, and it can play a role in mainstream society, not as something to do with the past or something which is a leftover, but it's something which is alive and vibrant and showing us new things about ourselves.
That's interesting. When you mention a level of rigor, are you thinking there of like using scientific method or a philosophical testing of different modes of being?
I mean, I think really I just mean, being willing to question things deeply and to doubt and to not take things on the surface and not to go along with things just because they're traditional or because they fit in with previous ideas. But, all the great advances we've seen in science is because somebody thought outside the box. I mean, when you think about, think of Newton. I mean, he was a deep man in many respects, but I mean, to actually be able to get to the place where you could go, oh, I can show that the thing which is making this thing drop, an apple drop from a tree, as they say, is the same force that's actually moving the stars and planets. I mean, that is such a jump from anything that human beings had ever conceived of before. I mean, it's immense. And then for Einstein to come along not that long afterwards and go, oh, yeah, okay, that was great, but hey, all of those concepts don't really work.
Hold my beer.
Try these. And then we're into a completely different understanding. Well, that's what I think. That's what I would like to see for spirituality, and that's why, I disappoint people because people read one of my books and they go, "Oh, I really like it," and that's such a lovely thing when someone reads the way I've expressed ideas and it's helped them and they get it. And I mean, I'm touched. And then here I'm coming along going, "Oh yeah, but I don't think I was right anymore." And it's like, what? No. But I think that's part of what we owe each other, is to keep moving and to be able to go, actually, and it's not it's a bit like the Newton and Einstein thing. I didn't mean to bring them up for this reason, but I can make this point with them perhaps, which is, for practical purposes, Newton's pretty useful. But actually, we've moved on to a different form of physics. And in spirituality, it's not like the past is redundant. It's that we need to move on to a deeper understanding in a new context now and honor that by keeping improving it. And that means admitting we're wrong. And I'm up for that, which is why I've come out, for instance, recently about some of the ideas we were sharing here about consciousness and gone, oh, I think I was completely wrong about that.
Oh, while you mention consciousness, where do you think it's derived from? Consciousness? Are you it's a sort of accident of brain chemistry, or it's telegraphed in from the fifth dimension, or have you? where do you sort of stand? Or do you even have a firm view on the generation of consciousness?
Yeah, I do. I think. So my previous position would have been what is called the idealist position. It's all in consciousness. There's one big mind, all of that stuff. I don't think that's right now, for a whole load of reasons. So the way that I would approach this is to go back to what I said earlier, which is, look, I am Tim in relationship to the universe. And I look around me and I go, well, everything is the one in relationship with itself. Everything is the oneness of being in the process of becoming in relationship to everything else. So we live in a relational universe, it seems to me. So that the way I would see the universe is that it's a uniduality. It's one thing in relationship to itself through everything. So everything's relational. And in physics now, that's a major movement that physics is relational. And that's in quantum physics particularly. And that's really interesting to me. What that means is that I look at this and I go, oh, what's evolving is relationships between systems. And when I call things systems, I don't mean to degrade them. I mean, you're a beautiful human being full of imagination and creativity and thoughts. And I don't mean you're a system. I don't mean we live in the matrix. It's just a simple language to describe everything. I mean, we need, when we talk about human beings, we need all sorts of other languages to do with beauty and music and struggle and all sorts of other languages. But in a very simplistic way, I'm a system in relationship to all these other systems. And it seems to me that we can understand then that there is, if you see that, then every system is reading every other system, or the systems it relates to, right from the beginning. Chemicals are reading each other, which is why two chemicals will explode and another two will bond into something greater than them. And then when you reach the biological world, systems are reading each other all the time to survive and to avoid dying. So that reading of each other in a subject-object way, it hasn't suddenly arisen. It's always there. It's there right from the very, very beginning. What happens is it keeps emerging. And what I suggest has happened is that with the evolution of life and death, the systems start taking in the most enormous amount of information through the senses. And the vast majority of it doesn't matter. But some of it really matters. Information about someone you want to try to kill you, information about what you can mate with, information about what you can eat, that really matters. So that what the system develops is the ability to process this information that's coming in unconsciously, but is able to process it in, if you like, high definition. It's able to focus. And I think that's what consciousness is. That's what it is. I prefer to not to even make it a noun. I think it's an activity. It's I am conscious of. So as I sit here now, I notice that, well, I'll suggest you do it now. I say, if you pay attention to your left foot, I suspect it will suddenly come into HD. You'll suddenly go, oh, my left foot. Before, it was still there. You just weren't conscious of it. It wasn't important. But I've just gone left foot, and oh, there it is. Wherever you put your attention, you are conscious of that, and you process it in a high definition, if you will. So I think then you haven't got this problem that something has arisen from nowhere, because it's that relationality is all the way through the system, right down to the very beginnings. And what you got is the evolution of relationship, and then what we experience as conscious experience, what's happening now, is a very, very, very emergent form of that, which is why it feels very special. That's the way I would approach it.
Yeah. So that's because we're sort of, I don't know if this is even correct, but we're sort of at the apex of evolution on this planet, at least. Is that why there's this sort of feeling of sort of human exceptionalism, with us regarding the animal kingdom, for example?
Yes, and it's a great thing that we've realized, look, we're part of nature because we've come from nature, and that we're going to care for nature and we're not going to treat it badly, all of that. But I think you'd have to be pretty foolish not to see that what's happened for us is the leading edge of the whole evolutionary process. And the big jump after just being conscious of the senses has been to be conscious of our processing in such a way that we've created the psyche or soul. So that if you look at the psyche or soul, it's full of images of the sensory world, but it's taken off in such a way that it's a whole domain has formed of imaginal information. So that my hypothesis would be that the thing that gets called the Duat by the Egyptians, or the Bardos by the Tibetans, or the spirit realm, or has itself evolved. That is the leading edge of the whole process of evolution. So that the domain we're exploring with spirituality, and the domain I think the psyche or soul has evolved to survive the death of the body. So all of these spiritual ideas, which I take very seriously, I think can be understood now within an evolutionary context. And it changes them in one way, but it's an extension of an old idea as well.
On the topic of technology, and very topically, Elon Musk's Neuralink was granted FDA approval for the first clinical trials, I think yesterday, maybe the day before. I'm not sure how I feel about things like Neuralink, but I want to get your opinion on what your views are regarding harnessing invasive technology like that to augment the spiritual evolutionary process.
Well, I think it's inevitable. And I'm quite just by my temperament, I guess I'm a kind of optimistic, and it just feels like, how exciting. What's that going to be? And I look at someone like Elon Musk, and I see someone who's intensely creative and willing to take risks, and it's like, oh, okay, where's that going to go? Now, but like you said, to me, it's going to supplement it. A bit like, I live my life in front of this funny screen where I put all my ideas down and talk to other people. And that's great. And some people don't think it is. They think it's terrible. I think it's great. I love it. And I know, and it's made being a creative person and being a philosopher far easier than it was before, much easier. So brilliant. So if that can happen in some way, if Elon popped around and said, hey, we're going to pull you, catch you up with this thing, and you'll be able to think twice as quickly and 3 times as well, I'll be like, yeah, do it now.
Sign me up.
Yeah.
Drill in the head.
Really.
In the back of the head.
Really.
Wow.
But, that was the attitude I took when I was younger, when someone said, hey, drop this LSD and you'll just think in a new way and it'll be fantastic. And they were right.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I'm more of a pessimist, Tim, because I love history as well. And history is rife with new technologies being used to destroy people first and foremost. And I just worry. I worry that our technological process is outpacing our spiritual process, our spiritual evolution, and that could be very deleterious to us and the planet. Because these tools can be wielded, like you said, for good or ill. And I don't want to talk about certain viruses that go around, because a lot of people think that might have been a slip up, that coming out. And
you're right. I mean, of course, and that's why we need pessimists or realists, and we need optimists. We need both, and they need to be in communication. But I would say, putting my own realist hat on here, I would say there's not that much chance of halting human creativity. So if that's not going to happen, then the other side of the equation is what we've got to address, which is, okay, well, in that case, we better hurry up and get wise enough that we can use things well. So the imperative for me that makes me get up in the morning and do this crazy thing all day is that it's like, oh, we need to wise up now. And there needs to be more and more of us until we've moved the culture on. Yeah. And the reason I am optimistic sometimes, because it's not always, but it is because we have come so far. And I do think it's important to see that, because you can certainly look through history and see a lot of awful things, but you can also look through history and go, wow, look at the way in which human beings have changed. Look at what we've achieved. Look at the good, the benevolence we've brought into the world. The level of compassion has never been this high, not even remotely. People care about other people on the other side of the world they'll never even meet or see, or don't even know what they look like, but they care. And that's a whole new thing. And so if we can keep that process going, then maybe we can get away with it and be wise enough,
You mentioned briefly that you spend a lot of time in front of your screen, which all of us do. All of us probably spend too much. How do you balance that off? Do you have certain spiritual practices you do, or going outside in the great outdoors? How do you sort of recalibrate yourself to sort of get away from the technological age?
Well, I do walk. I live in the countryside, so that's been one of my favorite things is to do philosophy while walking. I love that. And most of the work that I end up sharing arises first in those situations. So there's walking. I love that. But well, I used to call it meditating. I think it's now just sitting still with my eyes closed, or sometimes without my eyes closed. So I think I do. In my life, I've done an awful lot of sitting still, and I find that a very interesting thing. It's the opposite of the screen, really. It's just to bring everything as simple as I can make it, and just see what happens. And there's some very interesting states of the soul that you can enter into through that. So.
I was just wondering, just in terms of, I suppose, one of the accusations around society today is that is kind of quite individualistic, I suppose. So you kind of mentioned the meditation or sitting still and being quiet. But is there any particular ways that you could encourage people to be a uni individual, I suppose?
Yes. Great question. Thank you. A perfect question, actually. So one of the things is kind of that's led me to this unividualism is going, okay, so in the West especially, but now it's spreading through the whole world, we have become individuals. Again, it's easy to assume people always were this individualistic. They really weren't. Mm. You look at old pictures and everyone's wearing the same clothes, and it's like, oh, those people all wear that hat, and those people wear that hat, and now we're just like, we have our own ideas. We're ideational individuals. We have our own opinions. Everyone had the same opinion. What the church told you, not everyone, but much more like that. We were collective. We've become individual, and then and that's great. Actually, it's beautiful, but there's a price. We become isolated, it can become narcissistic, all the problems that people point to, which is why I've looked at it and gone, okay, so what's going to resolve the problems of individualism and take it to the next level? And that's what I think Unividualism does. And the practice that I've been exploring for 20 years, which blows me away, which I do at my retreats, is connecting people together. And it has the most extraordinary effect. So when people come to Glastonbury, to one of my experiential events, we'll settle in, relax, let people just be themselves. And that takes not that long. And then looking is a good way, but you can do it through sound or even movement and touch. But if you just sitting and looking at somebody, looking at their eyes, and what you become aware of, if you do that in the right way, is that you see their face, like you're seeing my face. Here it is, all the 64 years of craziness. And then, but what you're connecting with, you can't see it. You're connecting with a soul, a psyche that's looking back at you. And that, when you get that, there's a connection of soul to soul, which is incredibly profound. And then there can be a moment where you go so deep into it, there's one of you looking at it itself, as it were. You see, there's the oneness of being as Tim is reaching the oneness of being as you, and then we are connecting in that oneness. So that if you do that, I'll do a thing with people which can sound a bit intimidating, but it's actually the sweetest thing. Once you start it, first people think this will be a bit much, but by the end, you're just like, don't let it end. It's so great. I will get people and we'll play beautiful music, really all sorts of different music, but just kind of hold you. And you'll get to sit with somebody and just be with them, looking in their eyes, maybe for 3 minutes. And then you'll move around and there'll be another person. And you do it again. And then you move around and there's another person and you do it again. And you'll do that with a room full of people, maybe 20 people. I've done it with bigger groups, but 20, And by the end, you are in an utterly different state of consciousness. That's all. The love is like the room is just pulsating with this, like you're walking through it. There is something happens. We meld together. We form such deep soul connections, and the level of people become so beautiful. Everybody becomes so beautiful. And that's the way I can give people a taste of this unividuality. And when I started doing it, people find it a bit intimidating sometimes. That never happens now. Every single person, I think, for quite some time has just gone, wow, that just completely changed everything. And so you're meditating, but you're meditating on each other. And when I said everything's relational, well, you're taking the most emergent forms of existence, you and people, and you're letting them relate in a safe, focused environment. And what you get is a massive shift into what I call a deep awake state.
That's really strange, isn't it?
Well,
I was going to say, does this work online? Have you tried experimenting?
I have done it online, and it does work online. The very first thing that happened to me with COVID was I should have been in Japan doing this with a big group of Japanese people, and I couldn't go. And they said, well, should we have it on Zoom? And I thought, wow, really? I mean, I hadn't done anything on Zoom at that point. It was a whole new thing. And we did it with Japanese people and translation, and I've been doing it ever since. So one of the things that my community, the international community of Unividuals, the ICU, we get together to gaze. And there's somebody in Australia, and there's somebody in America, and there's somebody in Sweden, and me in Glastonbury, and we're gazing with each other. And you think, oh, this is interesting, because we're connecting. Because my body's here, but where's the soul? Where is it? I mean, just have a look for yourself. It's not in space, is it? It's non-spatial. It's in its own space. It's not like the body. So what happens, I think, is that we form these deep connections, even though our bodies are literally on the other side of the world. And that's interesting, because nothing like that's ever happened before. And that's just arisen through this funny Zoom thing we do.
I find it quite interesting because, staring somebody in the eyes is just something that you certainly that I wouldn't do.
You'd get the sack for it if you did it at work.
Well, there's always that, isn't there? But
be careful out there.
It's
make sure you get consent before you start staring at people.
That's part of it. You're right. Yeah. That's part of it. Because it's not the eyes. This is the thing. Often people will come to these events and afterwards they'll just go, "Oh God, why don't we just look at each other?" And and I have to tell them, don't just walk out and just hello. It's like, that's not going to work. That's not a good idea. You'd probably be fine in Glastonbury, but nowhere else. And because it's not actually the eyes. Like all meditation, it's the attention. Why? Because, like I said earlier, what you place attention on, you process in high definition. And the more you focus, it's like if you meditate on your breath. When I was taught that when I was very young, it seemed like the most boring. The basic message I heard was, if you meditate on your breath, it is so boring that if you do it for enough hours, you will become enlightened. And then what I actually found was that if you pay the breath or anything really deep attention, it becomes amazing, because you're processing it in such a focused way, and your breath becomes this, oh my God, breathing is just amazing. So if you then take that attention and then put it on somebody else, on something you can't even see, then you're paying attention to the most emergent thing in the universe, somebody's soul. And the experience is enchanting in the deepest possible way.
I think that kind of makes sense to me, at least, in terms of certainly I spend large parts of the day in my own head thinking about my own thoughts and my own problems and my own issues. So if I used up, some of that attention just focusing on somebody else, whether that is in silence or just talking to them or whatever, there is an obvious difference there, isn't there, in terms of what will be going through your mind, both consciously and unconsciously, I would guess.
Yeah, and when I say it's not to do with the eyes, it's like what I want people to get is once you've got it, You can do it with, you can do it with blind people. You can do it with the person next door to you, even though you're not looking in their direction, because it's where you put your attention. You're just actually making a deep connection with your attention. And it doesn't have to be a person. It could be nature. It could be a tree. It could be the air. It could be anything. But another person is very special.
You mentioned the retreats that you do. I'm guessing information about that will be on your website. But I know when we were setting this up, you also do these Sunday night meetings as well. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so that's the ICU. We do that every Sunday night. I'm not doing it this Sunday night because we also have a community meetup where I don't show up, so that people can get to know each other without me being there. Because of my relationship with it all, if I'm there, I will tend to do all the talking. So I don't want to do that. So they all meet up without me, which is nice. And then otherwise we meet up and we'll have 1 week where we'll do gazing or we'll do meditation. We'll have 1 week where we do philosophy. We'll have one where I try out ideas. It's kind of, it's not a subscription service. It's not like subscribe to my community, which people do, and that's great. But this isn't this. This is me going, I'm trying to develop something, which is a new approach to spirituality. If you're attracted to it, join me. That's it. And support me in doing that. Because when I share the philosophy with you, it will be half-baked. It will be because I'm not quite ready to say it publicly yet. But I'll say it to you and you tell me what you think. And I'll get better at saying it through sharing it with you. So you're supporting me. And there's no fixed charge, and anyone can come as a guest. But it would be nice if you contributed something, because then I can use that to support what I do, and that's it. That's how it works. And literally, it's a small thing. It's beautiful people all over the world, and they've become a community. They've become friends, because I'm someone who wants to doubt things and find better things. It's very inquiring, but then because I'm a love junkie, there's a lot of people there that are just into the love thing. So there's a whole cross section, a strange, like my retreats. You come to one of my retreats. I hope you do one day. And I have them in my home now in Glastonbury, because we've got one big room, which we can get 20, 24 people in very, very comfortably. It's lovely in Glastonbury. And I'll do 3 a year at the moment since COVID. I'll do one in the autumn. In September, and then I do one at New Year, which is also an excuse to have a party and celebrate being alive. It's like so at the New Year one, we'll have after the gazing I've talked about. Then we'll just put some music on and have a few drinks and celebrate. So, but with all of them, it's wanting to encourage people to be all that they could be. So because I'm not of the school that goes, oh, you're already perfect and you've fallen and all, because what I'm saying is, no, I'm not perfect. I'm evolving, hopefully, towards something better, just like everything else is. So I want to support you, and you can support me. And when we do it together, it's easier.
It kind of sounds like workshopping. Or like what a stand-up comedian would do. They would go to open mic nights to sort of work out the material and bounce ideas, and they can gauge the audience reaction to improve the material.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's the same thing with philosophy. Yeah, very much. And you want people you feel comfortable with, and you can trust, and also I want to engage other people to help develop this anyway, because I'm going to be here for such a short period, and I'm going to be gone. So if this has got any value, it has to be of value to other people. So I don't want to hang on to it. I want to give it away.
Wow. We're running up on time pretty soon. What sort of stuff do you read, Tim? What sort of books do you like to read?
I like to read books about things that I don't know much about. So
that's a long list for me.
Well, it's a long list for me as well. But it's things where, so I don't read spiritual books much,
right?
Because I don't. No, most of them. I don't read spiritual books. Let's leave it at that. But I will read. I've read the latest one of the recently. Just finished a book by Jonathan Haidt, the American psychologist. That was
Yep.
very interesting, about ethics. I read an old book by Thomas Sowell, the American
Based.
commentator,
Yeah.
who was just a great writer, really, really interesting. I like thoughts which confront me and force me to look at my own ideas and maybe change them. So Thomas Sowell is very good at that for me. He makes me think. So I like that. So things that make me think. And I go in phases. There's phases when I'll read a lot, and then there's phases where I don't. And part of what I do with the philosophy, I think, is deliberately avoid things which are too close to it, because I'm somebody. I really admire Peter Gandy, who you mentioned. He's a dear friend of mine. One of the reasons I was a bit tired is I was at his house till very late drinking too much Jack Daniels last night, and we've been having this conversation about philosophy for 40 years or more now. Well, way over 40 years, 50 years, and he's meticulous. He reads and reads and reads and reads and reads all this stuff. That's all he does, really. And I'm much more like, I work better if I develop the ideas independently, and then I go and seek out all those people that have kind of had similar ideas before me and help understand that. But if I let them in too early, they confuse me, and I lose the clarity that I'm developing.
Yeah, and I guess they will influence you as well. We're all a product of the things that we consume, whether it's media or podcasts or books, whatever.
We are, but I think because of the nature of the psyche, and because it really is a domain in which we're connected, I think my own thoughts are often influenced by people that I haven't read. It's only later that I go, okay. So those thoughts which I was coming across had been developed. So my last book, The Soul Story, was where I started laying out this evolutionary philosophy. And immediately afterwards, people would say, oh, so it's kind of like A.N. Whitehead, philosopher for earlier in the 20th century. And I hadn't read Whitehead at all. But when I did, it was like, oh, yeah, it is. There's a precursor here. And I find that a lot. That it's like, oh, okay, these people. And I do think, well, that's part of the thing when you said, do you think people will be talking about what I did in the future? And of course, the likelihood is no. But what I do think is that everything each one of us does, whether remembered or not remembered, does affect how things happen and what comes next. Because I think we do exist in a collective psychic relationship as well. So it's not wasted. I think they move it on, and then I can stumble across it easier because they already made that particular pathway in the psyche available.
If everyone adopted that philosophy, God, the world would be a much better place, wouldn't it? If we realize that our actions have every decision we take has repercussions, negative or positive.
Yep.
And this is what hopefully the spiritual awakening will lead to, a sort of an accountability of ourselves and how we behave. That's what I
think that's really important. I was working. Part of what, the thing I'm working on with Unividualism, it's, I thought I was going to finish this project years ago, but it's been 10 years since my last book, just flat out most days working on this. And it's partly because what I want to, for my own sake, I guess, as much as anything, is I want there to be a coherence between ideas about the fundamental nature of the universe, the ontology or metaphysics of the universe, right the way through to how you approach spirituality, but also how does that affect how we live together? How does that affect our politics? How does that affect, because it's all one thing. It's not separate things, it's all one thing. And the ethical idea that I've been developing while I've been trying to work this out is a twofold ethic of universal benevolence and individual responsibility. And it was that second one that made me pick up on what you just said. So the universal benevolence comes from my experience of coming into the awakened state is this enormous love. But love's an emotion, and it comes and goes. And I couldn't function. If I was just in that big loved up state all day, I wouldn't be able to do half the things I need to do, and couldn't talk to my accountant or anything sensible. Be impossible. So that comes and goes. But there is something that clearly builds because I can see that in my own life. And the word I give for that is this universal benevolence. What builds up the more you experience the oneness is this wishing well to everyone and everything. And that becomes established. So I find that, even when someone pisses me off, I really wish them well, actually. It's just there with everyone and everything, even people that I'm shouting at someone on the TV because they're annoying me. I wish them well, actually. And so that's the universal benevolence. And then because that's the recognition that everything is one. But also, I'm an individual. I'm just Tim. I'm the universe as this particular person. And therefore, this is where I can respond to what life sends my way. So this is where I can express that universal benevolence. And that's my individual responsibility with my particular friends and my family and my work and my place in the world. And being able to have that sense that you said of that responsibility, because part of that responsibility is to find the most emergent Tim I can.
Right, yeah.
Because that's my responsibility.
I think that's a great note to end on. Would you agree, Matt?
I concur.
You concur. Well, I think we should wrap this part of the show up.
Okay.
Thanks, Tim. This has been fantastic.
It's been a real pleasure.
I'll put all the links in the show notes, as always. If you can stay on the line for us for 1 minute, just while we play ourselves out. You lot listening on YouTube, we'll be back in 10-15 minutes for part 2, do some news. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Ciao for now.
Ciao.
Thank you. Bye.